going online shortly.
Awesome. And so, Harry, as we jump in, as I think I told you, I always do what I call a little bit of community comments, talking about all the things that are going on in the industry. If people are listening to this and they want to send me a message because they have a giveaway or they're doing an event or something along those lines, please feel free to go ahead and send me a message, and I will be happy to chat about that. So I do see that we are live. I can see Harry, I can see Vlad, and I can see Bright Machines, the sponsor of the Reshoring episode, which is amazing. I want to kick off by continuing to talk about the Change Your Life giveaway. So that is going on for another 8 days. So Preston Hadley and Envision Automation are giving away an Allen Bradley Micro 850 PLC, a PanelView 800 HMI, and the CCW software that is included in that. I will make the caveat that I make every single time I talk about this. Is Preston's goal is if you are looking to get into manufacturing or automation, his hope is to give someone the opportunity like he was given, to give someone the opportunity as he was given a number of years ago. And this is the 4th time we've done it. I know at least 2 of the 3 people who have won the first giveaways have either gotten into the industry or used it as an opportunity to upscale their skills. Couple of special announcements. On the Shoulder of Giants, episode 8 is out now. Max and I talk about big feet, little feet, and all the reasons why we run suboptimally in manufacturing facilities, as well as ways that we can get beyond the thought of we have to do it this way because this is the way that it has always been done. If you guys are in Erie, Pennsylvania, or Northwest Pennsylvania, tomorrow I will be at the NEF event. Please feel free to drop me a link. Max and I are talking about the intersection of technology and operational excellence at 11:30 a.m. We'll also be at the event for at least half or 2/3 of the day. So if you guys are there, feel free to come by and say hi. And now, Harry, I get to embarrass Vlad, which I do every time before the show starts. So Vlad runs a very successful YouTube channel called Solus PLC. So we're currently streaming to Solus. So we're going to go ahead and wave hi to them. They've almost hit 30,000 subscribers. So they're literally at 29.9 thousand subscribers. If we hit 30,000 subscribers, I am absolutely going to take credit for all of those later this month. So please go ahead and hit the subscribe button to Solus PLC if you guys are watching, want to watch more of this show and all of the great content that Vlad continues to put out in the time that no one knows how he has time to put out all of those videos.
Thank you, Dave.
Absolutely, Vlad. Absolutely, Vlad. Vlad, before we jump into the reshoring theme, do you have any other comments?
I always like to mention Frank Lamb's series on mastering the machine. So Frank has been on the show, I believe, twice or maybe once or 2 times. And he has a series where he talks about the practical aspects of manufacturing. I've noticed that he puts out streams, I believe, every 2 weeks now, fairly consistently. And it's very interesting, I would say, engineering and technical topics that I think people should check out. And I know he posts the streams or the recordings of the streams on his YouTube channel, so definitely check him out as well.
So I'll have to make sure that I make note and get those links when Frank puts them out. I feel like I'm always the last one to know that Mastering the Machine has gone on, and I know about 2 days after the event goes out. But no, you guys should absolutely check out Frank and Mastering the Machine. We will go ahead and drop comments in the chat as well as in the show notes. But no, without further ado, everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy up here, Vlad. We have managed to make it to episode 60. We're launching a new theme all about reshoring. And I'd like to introduce our very special guest, founder of the Reshoring Initiative, Harry Moser. Harry, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Vlad, and everybody out there. Great to be with you.
Appreciate you joining us today, Harry. Before we dive into the Reshoring Initiative and kind of unveil maybe what you do today, could you give us a little bit more of a background of who you are? How did you get into manufacturing? Maybe what did you study and how did you get to where you are today?
Okay. So I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is right across the river from New York City. And I went through high school there, went to MIT, got a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, then a master's in engineering. And interesting, the MIT logo is mense manus, so mind and hand. So combining sort of the best of the mind, which maybe Harvard had before MIT came along, with the best of doing something with your hands, which MIT brought to the party, so to speak. Then went on eventually at night and got an MBA at University of Chicago. I had a series of manufacturing jobs. Started with GE in their manufacturing program in Schenectady. Came back and worked at MIT. Worked for Desimatic, a foundry equipment company. National Acme, a traditional long-term U.S. company. Cleveland Tristel, National Acme screw machines. Rotofinish, that was my first presidency. Rotofinish, vibratory finishing machines. And then my best job, this sort of the peak of my regular career. I joined Charmy Technologies, which is EDM machines initially, and so I started there as president in '85 and retired in 2010 and became chairman emeritus, what have you. So 25 years running the company. It was wonderful. It was a dream job for me. When I came in, we were seventh or eighth in the industry, and when I retired, we were number one. So this is the kind of thing you hope for in your career. That company is now called GF Machining Solutions, and it's EDM and five-axis milling machines. So when I retired I founded the Reshoring Initiative, and part of the motivation for that was because in my hometown of Elizabeth, the biggest thing in town was Singer sewing machine. Mm-hmm. And their main factory in the world, their principal factory was there, 2.5 million square feet, 5,000 employees. In its day, the biggest factory of any kind in the world. And I drove past 20 years ago, and it's all gone. Nothing is made, as far as I can tell, Singer makes nothing in the U.S. Everything's imported. And during my career, I tried to sell to all kinds of industries, foundry equipment, machine tools, and the industries and the companies went out of business, driven out by imports. And I never got to sell anything. So between all those backgrounds, somebody's got to do something about this. So when I retired, I founded the Reshoring Initiative.
And Harry, if I may, I would assume that most of our listeners or viewers would understand what reshoring entails, but could you give us maybe a more detailed picture? Could you define reshoring and also kind of list some opportunities and maybe challenges associated with it?
Okay, that's pretty easy. So we actually track two things. One is reshoring. So General Motors can reshore. It can once again produce a car or a component here that it for a while was producing somewhere else and shipping here. That's reshoring. But then separately, foreign direct investment, FDI. So if Toyota builds a factory here, instead of shipping in from China or Japan or somewhere else, it's just as equally brought a job to the United States. So we don't care who owns it as long as it isn't China making missiles for us. So reshoring, FDI, we track the two of them. We also track two within each of those. There's the work that comes back in-house. So a company shuts a factory in somewhere, India, China, Malaysia, and builds a factory here, in-house, clear. But there's probably more work that comes back outsourced. So we were getting the castings, we were getting the machine parts, we were getting the wire harnesses somewhere outside the U.S., and now we're outsourcing that work to a contractor here in the United States. And so there's probably more of that outsourced work than there is in-house work, but the in-house gets most of the publicity because big factory, 1,000 workers, a lot of governor, all this stuff going on. Right? So we track both of those, and the work can come back. Doesn't absolutely have to be the same product. It can be a later revision. It could even be company A used to import a product and got a big chunk of the market. Company B starts making that product here, takes the market away from them. We say that market has been reshored. Okay, so you're talking about challenges, I think, and opportunities. Biggest challenge is that U.S. wage rates are high, relative to our major competitors, relative to China, especially, but also Mexico, right across the border. So compared to a lot, the low wage countries, we're 3-4 times as high, and so you have to be substantially automated to overcome some of that. So that's a challenge. Just the availability of skilled workforce is a challenge. Skilled or unskilled, very hard. You hear about it. There's 800,000, a million job openings in manufacturing, and very few people looking for jobs in manufacturing because they're all employed. So the workforce issue is a challenge. The opportunities are huge. Companies have recognized that it's a mistake. Many companies have recognized that it's a mistake to have so much dependent on other countries at a distance, especially China and Russia, Ukraine, so on, and they're deciding that they have to do something about it. So the opportunities are huge to do it if we can find the skilled workforce to do it.
And what goes into, I guess, like, I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit better, because in my mind, you would have to analyze what it would take to, again, as you said, either bring an entire facility back to the US or perhaps find a third-party supplier that's able to manufacture your widget, your product, whatever that may be. So how do they analyze perhaps the risk of doing that, the cost of labor, what it's going to take, like, on the automation side? Like, could you walk us through that process maybe of someone starting to look into reshoring and going through the procedure to figure out whether it's the right move for them?
Okay. Left on their own, most companies, especially big companies, look only at the purchase price. Either the wage rate for where to put the factory or the purchase price in terms of buying it. So just an interesting story. Jack Welch one time said he'd like to put his factories on a big barge and move it to a country. Let's think China, okay? And then when the local wages went up so high that it wasn't economic anymore, he'd take the barge, he'd move it over to Indonesia, and then to India, and then to Africa, and move the factory to where the least expensive people were. So wages tend to drive the question. The companies talk about purchase price variance, PV, and the procurement person's job is to reduce the purchase price of the basket of goods that he or she purchases. So the majority of companies do that, but increasingly we are convincing them that they should instead look at a variety of other factors. So we talk about total cost of ownership. So total cost starts with that purchase price, the U.S. and China. Typically, say the U.S. is going to be higher, maybe 30, 40% higher. But then the system, the user answers a series of questions, and it adds in the duty and the freight and the carrying cost of inventory and the possibility of emergency air freight and the risk of stocking out and all this stuff. And eventually it turns out that when they do that, they find that about 20 or 30% of what they're now importing, they'll be more profitable sourcing or producing here. So. And then anything that can be done in terms of automation, in terms of reducing the cost to make the product, redesigning it, applying, like when we were talking before, I think you were talking about theory of constraints. Applying methodologies like theory of constraints and the somewhat similar quick response manufacturing that comes out of University of Wisconsin-Madison. Very similar concepts for reducing, especially reducing delivery times, because there's a lot of, it looks pretty clear that if you can offer companies a dramatically shorter delivery, that they're willing, first they'll buy from you, that's good, assuming you've got quality and so on, and they're willing to pay moderately more, and especially now when the stuff they've ordered from China 6 months ago is stuck in a boat somewhere in the Pacific, and there's a darn, and you're available and you're 50 miles away and you can make the stuff for them and get it to them in a week, then that's great. But one of the problems has been that in the past, when delivery wasn't screwed up, I talked to some companies and they'd say I can get it faster from China, even by boat, than I can get it from a U.S. factory, because U.S. factories have long lead times and they don't jump on it, and the Chinese work 24 hours a day to get the stuff out, kind of thing. So it's up to the U.S. company to use methods like QRM, like theory of constraints, and cut the time from the order receipt to the shipment so that they can pick up that month, 2 months, 3 months difference in shipping time, and that's their delivery advantage, and then they can either get a bigger share of the market or demand a higher price, and many companies will pay for them, because you're all familiar with just-in-time inventories.
Absolutely.
So big trend. Companies have cut their balance sheets dramatically, saved them a lot of money. But over the last year or two, everybody's saying maybe you got too lean. Maybe you shouldn't go with just-in-time inventory. And so I was on an annual meeting of AMA, Association for Manufacturing Excellence, excellent group, lean group, and they discussed that. And everybody else said, yeah, we're too lean. You've got to go a little bigger on the inventory. I said, no, we're not lean enough, because if all those companies were lean, they would understand that they should not be having an extended supply chain, being dependent on stuff that has to be put in a boat and shipped, 5,000 miles, and takes 2 months to get there. That's entirely inconsistent with lean, inconsistent with Toyota production system, all these beliefs that have come down. And if they become more, they can become more lean and find local suppliers and reduce their inventory, be more just in time than they have been in the past. So we think the opportunities for reshoring are great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, I agree with your comments, Harry. I would say that kind of one of my frustrating points when people talk about lean, they think of lean as cost cutting, right? And so lean is not just how we can cut all of our costs. It is very much kind of that flow. And so if you can get systems and sub-assemblies much closer to your factory, then you can have significantly less inventory on hand at any part of in any part of your production process. So let me ask kind of the question. So the last 2 years or so, with all of the supply chain issues, are you finding more people are going through the calculations that you're talking about and saying it makes a lot more sense to reshore? If we're going to reshore, now is the time to do it?
Yes. They don't all use our calculator. We've got this free online calculator, and many of them from common sense. In many of the cases, the people in the company all knew that they were doing the wrong thing, but the Harvard MBA consultant that flew in, parachuted in, and told them what to do to cut their costs. They were doing what they were told to do. Their bonuses were based on buying the cheapest thing from somewhere, anywhere. It doesn't make any difference. So if you look at the actual trend, which is the one thing we're sure of, when we founded the Reshoring Initiative in 2010, in that year, 6,000 jobs were announced coming back. So 6,000 in 2010, peaked in 2017 with the tax and regulatory cuts. ROI went up, one being here, came down due to the trade war, business uncertainty. It picked up in 2020 due to COVID, all kinds of PPE, medicines, all kinds of stuff that had to be made to deal with COVID came back, that we found out we were dependent on other countries. And then in 2021, the country got going and started to invest in the chip foundries and the rare earth minerals and EV batteries, all these things that we were dependent on other people for. And so in 2021, we got 260,000 manufacturing jobs coming back announced in that year, so up from 6,000 to 260,000.
Wow.
And the rate this year looks like 400,000.
Wow.
Announced coming back. So it's just been a steady. It's basically steady like this, and we say that if you look at what's changed from 3 or 4 years ago, well, freight costs are 3 or 4 times as high, deliveries are 3 times as long. Everybody's starting to recognize the environmental benefits of producing here instead of there. The risk of Chinese decoupling. China's mad at us because of Trump, because of Hong Kong, and especially because of Taiwan. And they have threatened that if we pass certain legislation, they will stop shipping things to the U.S., including key automotive components. So I get in companies call me all the time, and I can tell, and some will admit that that's the major reason. Their companies afraid that everything they're getting from China could get cut off, and they're starting to do the math to figure out what they can do to bring back. And we say, at the least, bring back the 20 or 30% that you'll be more profitable bringing back, and get in here ahead of the surge. Because if China actually did that, if they cut everything off, there's going to be 20,000 companies out there looking for castings and machine parts and everything else, and you're just going to be one of them, and you're out of luck. So if you've gotten commitments now and you've started production, you're in much better shape.
And I really like the fact that you've mentioned that it goes beyond what you said, that companies at the surface level will probably look at the cost of labor, but ultimately there's a lot more risks, I would say, like in the current state of things in the world. But ultimately, there's many other factors to reshore beyond just the cost. And Harry, I guess like before we dive in a little bit deeper into reshoring, I wanted to talk more about what you're working on at Reshoring Initiative. So, what exactly is it that you do? What do you provide to your customers?
Okay, so we might say we have four pillars. First, we're the only one that documents the trend, these number of jobs, what industries, what states, for what reasons, from what countries, all that kind of thing. So we're the only source of data on it. And then we promote, like today we're promoting, it's good. Thank you. And we enable. So we have the TCO estimator I described, and then we have other tools that companies can use. So the import substitution program, a company can put up a product that they're really good at making, whatever it is. Hard to get this thing in focus. They're really good at making. It's a shaft, it's a bearing, it's a pump, whatever.
Yep.
And we train them to use TCO to make the case that is better to buy from them than to import. And then we can identify the biggest importers of those products in the country, what tonnage they're bringing in, whom they're buying them from, roughly what they're paying for them. And then our client goes to those importers and says, we think you're paying 15% less there than here. And we've done the TCO calculation. We've identified 20, 25 points of extra costs and risks. We think it's in both of our interests to get together and find a way to supply you here. Okay.
So it's effectively simplifying the process, correct? If I understand that, for someone who's looking to do the initial steps of reshoring and understanding what could be the alternatives here in the US, they could go through you and understand the numbers a little bit better and potentially be put in front of suppliers that could deliver on the product.
Well, we can work with the buyer to help them buy smarter, but we also work with the seller to help them sell smarter, to help them identify the prospects who are now importing. And because I can't get to all there's one of me. I can't get to 10,000 companies, 100,000 buyers and convince them all to reshore. But if I can train 5,000 manufacturing company salesmen to go out and make the case and be efficient about it and talk about total cost and tell them whom to go to call on, now I've got like channels out there, doing the work for me, and then I can actually retire.
And are you seeing that is making a difference, going and talking about I'm sorry, one more time, what did you call it, Harry? The program that you're working on?
There's the TCO estimator and there's the import substitution program.
The import substitution program, yes. And so when you go and you work with U.S. manufacturers in order to go talk to potential clients, are you part of those conversations? Are those conversations normally well received, or is there difficulty making those substitutions?
Well, one problem the companies have is making the connection, because we identify the company, the importer, the city, the state, the address, but then the seller, the job shop, the whatever component maker, has to be aggressive enough to make a contact at that company and figure the procurement person they've got to talk to. That's one issue. But there's ways to do that on LinkedIn. If you're smart, you go in LinkedIn, you get contacts, you hustle around. But the best case I have, there's a company outside Chicago, an EMS company. They make printed circuit boards and electronic assemblies. And they came to me about 5 years ago and said, Harry, need some help. Got a big problem. I said, what's the problem? They said, we're about to lose a big order. A Chinese competitor has offered a lower price. And so Tony and I did the TCO calculation. Tony took it in, and I have a letter from him saying that showing the customer that Maury's total cost was lower, even though his price was higher, was the key to winning a $60 million order.
Wow.
Okay?
That's very impressive.
Okay? So anybody out there in the audience, I'd be delighted to have help you win a $1 million or a $500,000 order. Just use the tool. If you do it and it wins, tell me about it. And if you need the help, email me and get some help, and then I'll have more stories to tell to David and Vlad next time.
No, I like that. So we will be sure to drop links to the TCO calculator on there. And if there's some more information on the import substitution program, I imagine we can find more information on the Reshoring Initiative website. We will make sure that we drop that information if people would like to read more about it, because
Yeah.
I think that's a very compelling story.
Yep. Let me give you another couple of cases. We just last night I was editing a report that some Bowling Green University students, graduate students, engineers, had been doing for a local transportation equipment company, in which they'd used the TCO calculator to do the analysis of what parts to bring back. So I trained them, and then they did the analysis. I edited the report a bit, and they're submitting it today, I think, and it was very positive. We have banks coming to us and saying, Harry, looks like reshoring's a trend. How do we pick which companies to invest in that will benefit the most from reshoring, either by buying smarter or selling smarter? We have private equity companies coming to us and say, how do we decide what companies to buy? And once we've bought them, how do we guide them to maximize the benefits from reshoring? I've had conversations with the National Economic Council, that's part of the White House. Mm-hmm. And in June 9th, I think, I'm testifying to the U.S.-China Economic Security and Review Commission, which reports to the President and to Congress. And their responsibility is to identify actions the U.S. can take to strengthen the U.S. relative to China, specifically. And so they've called on me to testify as to things that they can do. So we're having a lot of fun.
That seems like a very interesting discussion, Harry. I'm looking forward to the outcomes of how that goes. But I wanted to maybe ask you, on that same point, are you seeing similar, I would say, initiatives when it comes to reshoring across the board for different industries? Do you see this happening more in, like, as you've mentioned a few examples, in the automotive industry, in the electronics industry? Like, what are your thoughts on how it's going to impact the different segments in manufacturing in the U.S.?
The simplest thing is to look at our website, and under the heading resources, drop down data, and you get the 2020 and about to have the 2021 data report. And it may be the fourth or fifth figure, 10th page, there's a list of the top industries and how many jobs, how many companies have reshored in that industry. It turns so anybody wants details, they can find it there. But the transportation is clear number one, because when anybody brings a factory here, it's 2,000, 3,000 jobs. It comes in these massive chunks, and it's a huge industry anyway. So transportation is number one. I think appliances is number two. Maybe electronics, machinery, something on chemicals, something on that order. And a lot has been refineries, because of shale gas. The natural gas here is cheaper than anywhere other than Saudi Arabia, and therefore it's cheaper to make fertilizers and plastics and things like that here than it is in Europe or Japan or China, anywhere else. So the tendency is $100 billion worth of investment here that would have otherwise been offshore. But as a general rule, let's say recently, the last year or two, big trend towards chips, EV batteries, rare earth minerals, pharmaceuticals, PPE, all that stuff that we recognize as being a problem. So a surge towards that. As a general rule, products that are heavy and therefore have a high freight cost relative to their labor content. Mm-hmm. Okay? Products where the design changes frequently, so you don't want to have prototypes going back and forth across the ocean to approve and so on. Where there's seasonal demand, if you're going to send, so like t-shirt, plain t-shirts, probably, or some underwear seasonally same amount every year or every month, probably. Huh? Whereas Santa Claus outfits, you sell more October, November, December. So where there's seasonal demand now. If you get it from China or India, you have to order it 9 months in advance, and maybe it gets here, maybe it misses Christmas. You don't get it here in time. So where there's seasonal demand, it makes sense to make it here. Um, where there's intellectual property risk, something you can lose that you're afraid you're going to lose. A variety of those characteristics if I come to a company and they say, Harry, where should we start? I do not say take 4 random products and do the analysis. I say take the products where you have pain, where you have delivery issues or quality issues, where your inventory is too big or too small, where you're losing orders because you stock out, where there's too much travel, late night telephone calls to somewhere. Take it where you've got people that are really irritated by that product, because then we know when we do the analysis, they're going to help us to get it done instead of fighting us about it, right? And do 4 or 5 of those products, and then see what you'll learn from that, and then decide where to go from there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. No, definitely appreciate that. And we'll have the links, for those who are maybe listening to us after the show. We're going to have links posted in the resources section underneath the podcast. But Harry, I wanted to go back to a discussion we had a little bit earlier, which was on the workforce. And so my thoughts, as you have mentioned, when we bring back these facilities, or again, if we increase operations in the US, it's going to require a little bit more of automation, right? And so there's going to be some engineering resources involved, but also I would say the skilled trades involved. So what are your thoughts on, I would say, mainly what are going to be the skills in demand as we continue reshoring, but also what could be potential opportunities, for someone who's currently either maybe studying in engineering or looking at trade schools, or maybe even managing personnel looking to upskill their teams? What would be the key opportunities that you see there?
Okay, so first, just sort of for fun, I never use the word trades. In Germany and Switzerland, that's a profession.
Okay.
Okay, it's the tool and die profession, the plumbing profession, whatever. Because over there, 60% of the high school kids go into a profession by way of an apprenticeship. Okay, and it's a lot easier to entice the parents and the students into a profession than into a trade these days. Okay, so try to use profession, huh? So we think the best, and Germany and Switzerland and Austria and countries like that have done an incredible job. They get really smart kids, and I've taken tours over to see their apprentice programs. They get really smart kids at the age of 16, come into the apprenticeship. They come out at 20, and they're incredibly well trained. And the average skilled worker there is they're starting off with a higher intellectual capacity than ours, because we don't get many in the middle and the upper half kind of thing, and they get so much better training. So finally, their people are better than ours in these. Not they're bad, not all, not 100%, but on average. Like I took a group of apprentices to a Swiss machine tool manufacturer, and one of the managers there said, Harry, when we're designing the program for a part, we're going to sell a machine, we're going to send it with a program to make this complex part. When we do that for Switzerland or Germany, Japan, we do it in one setup, one complicated program. When we do it for the US, we break it down into 2 setups, 2 programs, because on average, your programmers and workers are not sophisticated enough to deal with a more complicated programming. Okay, and that raises cost, it reduces quality, it extends delivery, and so if we need to have a skilled workforce that's as good as the best in the world, and I'm not here to criticize people, but on average we don't, because for us it's been a trade instead of a profession, so to speak. Okay, so I recommend for people is to I didn't do it. So what I recommend for people is to start off right out of high school, go into an apprenticeship, let the company pay for you to go to community college and get your associate's degree in engineering. As soon as you're done with that, go nights to get your bachelor's degree in engineering, and then eventually perhaps go to get an MBA, and nights. you know, and with the company paying for it, you know, and the and the when I've taken these tours to Switzerland, I did it 4 times. You'd see that the managers of the companies, the leaders, the owners, the vice presidents were ex-apprentices. Here they'd be ex-MBAs or something, or they'd be MBAs. Over there, they started young. They joined the company as an apprentice, and they know the product, they know the process, they know the customers, they know the team, they know the market, and they work their way up in the company. They get an engineering or a management degree, and eventually they're running the company. Whereas here, you know, that doesn't happen very often. You have to have a bachelor's degree, a master's. You know, people like me, you know, and have done my job better if I'd spent 4 years actually doing some of that hand stuff instead of just all the brainy stuff. You know?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I
Um,
guess I'm
yeah.
curious because you've seen a lot of these programs, and again, I don't think that there's maybe a one answer to this, but do you think the programs are getting better in the US? Are we at least like on the right track of getting education down, or is it still, I guess, is there still a lot of room for improvement, so to speak?
I like to say that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Germany was a 10 and we were a 1. You know, Germany was great. And now over time, Germany and the others, they've been coming down because, like, and we've been coming up. Not a lot. We're still not as good as they are, but we're going the right direction. So I was on the board of the International Special Tooling and Machining Association. And we had we had meetings, and people come in from all the countries. And even from developing countries, Hungary, you know, Lithuania, you know, Poland, Czechoslovakia, the representatives would say, all the kids want to go to university. Nobody wants to work in manufacturing. Nobody wants to be a toolmaker or a welder or a machinist. And I read an article from that quoted a Chinese factory owner saying the same things. They can't get people to work in the factory anymore. They all want to go to university, kind of thing. And we went through that 20 years ago, and now kids are starting to understand about $100,000 tuitions in 4 years without making any money, or maybe 5 years, depending on how efficient you are. And we're coming up, and the rest of the world's sort of going down, and so I'm optimistic that that can continue. Uh, One of the things I recommend is that the government could do a lot for this. Have you ever seen the bar chart like this? And the headline is "Education Pays" or $1 million more lifetime income with a bachelor's degree. And here's no high school, community college, bachelor's, master's, and income goes up a number of degrees. And this
Yes.
is the Labor Department selling that. So about 10 years ago, Department of Labor called me down to tell them how to get the country ready for all the flux of jobs coming in with reshoring. So I'm in the Secretary of Labor's conference room, and I said, well, first we have to get the Department of Labor to stop being part of the problem and become part of the solution. And they said, okay, what do you have? You know, so I pulled up their chart, and I said, this says education pays, and it says you got to get degrees. And I thought you were responsible for the manufacturing workforce. Yeah. And I thought you were responsible for the apprentice programs. So in these bar charts, why don't you have one bar here that shows the average income of people who've passed an apprenticeship, and
Mm-hmm.
show that it's equally good as a bachelor's degree, and therefore when the guidance counselors, the parents, the principal looks at that and says, huh, yeah, apprentice program, yeah, that makes sense. Joe, Sue, Bill, why don't you go into an apprenticeship program? So I'm continually beating on the labor and education departments to tell all the story rather than just this myopic version that they like to tell. So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
anybody out there that can help get that message out, I'd love to have your help.
No, no. So I love that, Harry, and I need to follow up on this slightly. So I love the apprentice programs, right? So I've worked with a number of people who are trained German engineers who went through apprenticeships. I know a number of people who immigrated over to the EU and specifically Germany to go through these apprentice programs. Um, and I know a lot of people who go into what before today we would all call the trades, but now we're going to work on profession, right?
Yeah.
And so like I myself went to tech school, and there would be other opportunities if there was a lot of of apprenticeships available. I guess I haven't seen apprenticeships available in the US in mass like I've seen and heard of over in the EU. Are there more apprentice programs? Like I love the idea of what you're talking about. I haven't necessarily seen a lot of these 4 years apprentice programs, through manufacturing companies.
Yeah.
Do these exist? I guess is the first question.
Yes,
Okay.
not as many as I'd like.
Mhm.
The one I knew best was in Chicago. There's a trade association called TMA, Tooling and Manufacturing Association,
Mhm.
and at the peak 20 years ago, they had 1,000 apprentices in their program, 100, 500 companies, each with one or
Yep.
two apprentices. Yeah? And
Yep.
then 2008, 2009, they shut the program down. It was down to almost zero. And
Yep.
now they're back up 500 or so. So it's come back from the worst of times. I read about apprentice programs starting often. Hard for a small company because you spend a lot of money. You have to have someone train them. That's full
Mhm.
time, somebody training them. And then they graduate from your apprentice program and General Motors hires them away for $10
Yes.
more an hour. So that's no fun. So what I've seen, one of the ones I like best, there's Apprenticeship 2000 is in Charlotte, North
Okay.
Carolina, and there's maybe 10 or 15 companies from small like mold maker to big kind of company, the
Okay.
billion-dollar year company, and they get together, they promote it collectively. They find the students, they give the students some choice of where to do their apprenticeship, and maybe they move them around a little bit so they get more experience. So they've got a rather professional way of going about it. And the one company I know, Scott Rotman, I think runs it. This is a mold maker there, and last time I checked, he had maybe 30 employees, and the average age of the people on the floor was 32
Oh
or
wow.
something like that. When you go to most mold makers, it's 50.
Yes.
So he's got a future built in because he's got these smart kids that he got on board. He trained them right, and they've got careers ahead of them. So I believe more. And is there enough? No. One solution. You're all familiar with uh, college loans.
Mhm.
The U.S. is it's 1.5 trillion dollars worth of loans, and there's like 100 billion of defaults a year or
Yes.
something like that. It's horrible, and government's always wanting to write them off to buy votes and so on. And but we don't have apprentice loans, and one reason companies don't do apprenticeships is that they're afraid of that scenario I described where you pay the kid a decent wage because he
Yep.
needs it. He's got a kid and a house, and they need 15 something an hour or more. And at first they're being trained, they're not making anything.
Mhm.
And so I've been pushing for apprentice loans. So the apprentice, maybe you pay them 12, the company does, and they borrow 5 from the government from the apprentice loan program. So now they're making 17, not bad. You can live on that. And and at the end of the apprenticeship, if they stay on with the company
Mhm.
over 5 years, the company pays off the loan.
Okay.
Okay, so everybody wins. The government invests a little money. The company invests some money. The company gets the worker gets the training. And so why aren't we doing that when you can go and get $100,000 worth of loans to study sociology, anthropology, basket weaving, all the stuff where there's already tens of thousands of unemployed graduates who are working in Starbucks and McDonald's. You see? So let's devote the resources to where the need is rather than just be politically correct about it. Things we can do.
I like that, Harry. I like that a lot. And I want to continue this conversation, but first we have some people to thank. So Vlad's going to play a sound that we can't hear, and then I'm going to go thank Bright Machines.
There you go, Dave.
Awesome. So we want to thank Bright Machines for sponsoring the reshoring theme and all their support of the community. At Bright Machines, we believe there's a smarter way to build things. That's why we're working with manufacturers around the world to rethink manufacturing operations for whatever comes next. We enable manufacturers to reshore more quickly, to future-proof their factories, to keep up with fluctuating demand and to save money. With a full-stack solution for assembly and inspection that marries deep industry and technology expertise with hardware and software in new ways for a more intelligent approach that's more flexible and more scalable for the next normal and beyond. And then Bright has given us a couple of actually great guides about reshoring. So they've got a guide for 2022 that actually features Harry. There's a quote of Harry in there, and there is a link to the TCO calculator in there, like right in the first couple of pages. And then they have the top 5 answers to reshoring as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop some bit.ly links down in the chats below. And if you guys are listening, you guys can check the show notes for those links to those articles as well. So we want to thank Bright for all their support of this and the reshoring theme and the community in general. But yeah, I want to get back to reshoring, Harry, because this is a very exciting conversation. One of the things that kind of I was thinking about is like there are a bunch of really good initiatives that you've talked about. I love the Apprentice program that you've described. And I think you said something to the effect of you are only one person. And so you need help, right? You need to help teach other people how to do the TCOs so that they can go and find new opportunities. But I guess kind of the broad question is, what can we do to help? Either Dave and Vlad or the people listening, what can we do to help to bring more factories, more facilities, more jobs back into North America, because that helps all of us in the end?
No, if there are, I break it down between the buyers and the sellers. So if you work at a company that's mainly a buyer, you buy a lot of components, a lot of material, a lot of finished products. Well, then encourage procurement, purchasing within your company to rethink. And if you know they're importing a lot, and especially if you know they're having problems with deliveries, then say, hey, why don't we get them locally? How about that factory that we own down the street that's only half used? Why don't we get that going again and hire some people and get things going right here in town and help our town and our state and our country? So that's for buyers. And for sellers, it's use the TCO as a sales tool and try our import substitution program that'll help identify the leads. If it's buyers, if it's like consumers,
Yep.
Americans are great consumers. That's how we drag China out of poverty to supply us. Okay, so I had this I think fun quote. If you're out at a store and you're about to buy something, and it's made outside the United States, especially China, ask yourself, am I buying this because I need it or just because I like buying things? And I don't really need it. Well, if you're just buying it because you're just for fun, well, then look around the store and find something made in the U.S. that you don't need that you could buy just for fun.
I like that.
Because you don't need
like
it.
that.
It shouldn't make any difference. And then you'll have equal or more gratification for yourself from the buying process, and you'll give an American the gratification of having a job to produce the product. So just think about what you're buying. It's hard. I mean, I go into stores and I want to buy something made in USA, and I can't find anything.
Yep.
In the categories I look at, there's nothing there. And so what I call on retailers to put a big sign up over their service desk and say, with a big flag on it, say, ask us about our made in USA products. And then if I come up and ask them, they oh sure, they print shirts, aisle 3, shelf 4. Running shoes, aisle 6, row 7, or something like that, and now I can find the made in USA. And then if people keep asking them, then hopefully they'll have more made in USA products. They'll sell more made, and things keep going better, kind of thing. So there's a lot that retail can do, that consumers, manufacturers, government. There's a role for everybody. My goal is to bring back 5 million manufacturing jobs, which is a 40% increase in U.S. manufacturing.
Wow.
And it needs Dave and Vlad and everybody out there listening.
Absolutely.
I was gonna ask a question, I guess, about the government's involvement, and I know that we talked a little bit about that earlier in the stream, but are there, again, like programs, initiatives that the government is, I would say, putting forward for manufacturers to make that transition a little bit easier? And I think, we've talked about obviously some of the policies that have been put in place, and I guess some positive, some negative, that are maybe forcing reshoring, that influence the risk of producing in China or offshore, but are there any maybe monetary support programs that are offered by the government? And I would say also, like, tying into that long question, what do you think like the government will be or should be doing more than what it is currently doing?
Okay, so in terms of what they do, there's an office, part of Commerce called Select USA, which helps companies decide to do this foreign direct investment, or U.S. companies, and they're small on this so far, to reshore. There's the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships, the MEPs. There's one in every state, and one of their missions is to encourage reshoring. I've worked with a bunch of them around the country. There's the Exim Bank, whose job is to provide financing and insurance for what, like you're shipping to Indonesia and you want to make sure you get paid. They ensure that you'll get paid. So they've announced recently that they will make money available to reshore production, especially if the production is going to be exported. And that's fine. There's a bill in Congress, I think it's the America Competes Act, that we're an endorser of, and it calls for a $45 billion fund that will be available to loan or grant to companies that want to reshore. So that's the first substantial general purpose money as opposed to specifically chips or Small Business Administration, others like that. Finally, a lot of the money actually until now has come from economic developers. So each state and most cities and counties have an economic development administration that encourages companies to build factories there, to expand, to retain, and so on. Yep. And they make, they'll put up $1 million, $500,000, 100,000, whatever it is, depending on how many jobs that you can add. And they believe you're going to do that. You have to do it. You only get the money if you actually bring the jobs. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of look, other countries are much more aggressive. China's much more, like when Apple was first going over there, I think, and trying to find Foxconn, I think the Chinese built the factory and said, okay, how about this? Kind of thing. You're not going to find anybody in the U.S. doing that. So China and others have been much. The other countries have industrial policies, and that's been verboten here because it doesn't. The Democrats don't want to help industry so much, and the Republicans believe it should be a free market decision. But every other country does it, and that puts us at a disadvantage. So we have something called the Competitiveness Toolkit that takes a series of industrial policies that we could implement and says how many jobs we bring back if we did each of them. So our number one recommendation is billions of dollars for skilled workforce, because you absolutely need it if you're going to grow. Second is get the dollar down by 20 or 30%. It's generally agreed the dollar, because we're the reserve currency, is overvalued by 20 or 30%, makes us too expensive. So get the dollar down. Have a value-added tax. In almost every other country, if we ship something there, it gets hit with a 15% tariff in addition to their duty. When they ship something here, their government gives them a 15% credit, like a subsidy. We don't do it. We're stupid. Keep the corporate income tax reasonable. Don't there was talk about raising it to 28%. Don't do that. Keep it at 21%, or lower it further, and tax rich people like Dave and Vlad instead. Okay.
Oh, we hope one day, Harry. We hope one day to have made enough money that we're the rich people that get taxed like they're talking about. No,
anyway, so those are the kinds of things that they are doing, and the things that they have not done a good enough job at.
Okay, so are there skills? So at least probably 20 or 30% of the people who listen to the show are in automation, are in some sort of service providers. Are there skills that you see are needed to help manufacturing companies now, 2-3 years from now, in order to increase their throughput, or to remain to be competitive in this market as we continue to reshore? Automation or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think automation is clearly essential. And the reality, like you say, are we automating? Artificial intelligence, Industry 4.0, blah, blah, blah. You read articles about tax the robots because they're going to take all our jobs.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, yeah? And yet, manufacturing productivity in the U.S. has increased approximately 0.5% per year for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So you've had almost no manufacturing productivity increase, despite all the talk and to some extent the investment. So the automation has not succeeded. I believe it can. It certainly, there's examples where it's been amazing, but on the average, it hasn't done what it should, and therefore, so, and yet people say don't automate because it's going to cost us jobs, and I say that because, like you see in my map there, because we're competing across the world with other countries, especially low-wage countries and those with industrial policies and very good skilled workforces, we say we will lose more jobs to Chinese automation if we do not automate than we will to U.S. automation if we do, because we've got to compete for the jobs, we've got to compete for the work. So we say automate, automate, automate. We can, just balancing the trade deficit will bring back 40% increase in U.S. manufacturing. So you can use that to that increase in production will allow us to actually increase the number of manufacturing jobs, even if we dramatically automate and increase productivity. So automate is clearly one of the key answers.
I love that, Harry, and I'm going to ask you the softball question that I feel like we've been talking about for most of the show, but I ask everyone. So what do you think the future of reshoring looks like?
This year looks like 400,000 jobs announced, which is incredible. But there's a limit. If I could bring back 1 million jobs this year, we already have a shortage of 800,000 manufacturing jobs, and so you'd add 1 million to that, and the whole system would collapse. Deliveries would extend. It wouldn't be good. So it's a question of attracting more people into the professions. It's a matter of companies expanding, companies making the decision, seeing the wisdom of bringing it back, listening to the podcast, and getting on board.
Absolutely.
It's got to happen though, because the U.S. has. Looking forward, we've got a $1 trillion plus budget deficit at the federal level, and we've got $1 trillion plus trade deficit. And if you keep having those time after time, eventually the dollar will collapse. It won't come down 20, 30%. It'll come down like happens in Brazil or Argentina or somewhere like that. And then we'll be the country where the Chinese send the dirty work to get done, because they don't want to do it anymore because they've fixed up their own environment. So we think the opportunities there. It's a question of people getting on board. One thing I wanted to point out is my manufacturing is cool T-shirt.
I love it.
Okay, and it is. It's a wonderful industry. It's a wonderful profession, and everybody who's out there, I hope you'll agree. And if you're not in manufacturing, you'll get in. If you got kids or grandkids. Tell them it's a wonderful profession, wonderful career.
No, I would agree with that. And I would say one of the overarching themes over the course of the now 60 shows we've done, Harry, and the thousands of conversations that Vlad and I have had, is that many people don't consider manufacturing as a viable career option, right? Like, unless you grew up and you had an uncle or a dad or someone who worked in a facility, and maybe you got a start at 18 or 20 working at a facility or working at a service provider in something, no one necessarily thinks of manufacturing as a viable career opportunity when you're young. And I feel like we have to change that conversation so that people know that manufacturing is not only a viable career opportunity, but is generally a very stable opportunity that can provide you and your family a decent wage over the lifetime of you wanting to work, just in general.
Yeah, you may have heard the pejorative, the 3Ds: dirty, dark, and dangerous.
Yes.
That people say about manufacturing.
Yes.
So I'm working on an article in which I take the 3Ds, I add 2 more: dead end and declining.
Okay.
So I got 5 Ds now. And then I came up with 5 S's, like shiny and safe instead of dirty and dangerous. Okay, so I have 5 S's, and then to the extent that I can prove that point statistically, for example, the average accident rate and death rate in manufacturing is lower than the average of all employment.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is a safe job on average. Okay, and in terms of dead end, that wages go up faster for people in manufacturing than they do in other occupations. So and then for things like dirty and dark, I've gotten companies, trade associations, to send me in pictures of the most beautiful places where you can eat off the floor. So imagine this article. I'm going to start with the 3Ds, the 5Ds, the 5S's, and then prove statistically or by pictures the examples. Get that overview published somewhere as high up as I can, Industry Week, New York Times, whatever, and then I'm going to offer to trade associations and states. If you'd like a copy of this adapted for your use, for you to use to promote, to get the kids to be recruited into manufacturing, we'll put in the pictures, some statistics about your state, and the pictures of companies in your state or your industry. Now you've got a tool custom made to convince kids that this is the right place to go. So
I think that would be amazing. That would be really cool, Harry. I think, like I'll maybe draw a very short parallel to how I got into manufacturing. And to be quite frank with you, like I didn't know what was available in the industry, right? So after graduation, I started looking everywhere. And as you know, I think most manufacturers don't do the best of jobs at promoting themselves or even showcasing some of their technology that is there. So the automation space is, I would say, really awesome once you get to see it. But once I actually went through the interview process and went to see what an automated manufacturing line looks like, I knew like, yeah, that's where I'm going. You know what I mean? Like and I think like they maybe do a disservice to themselves by not showing, as you said, the pictures of actual manufacturing processes, because you get the picture of, 20, 30 years ago when it perhaps was dirty and dark. But at this point, I think there's so much like technology. I think there's a lot of funding going into automation. Everything has been like revamped quite a bit, and that's been for decades, right? Like it's been getting better and better. So anyways, to me, I'm very visual, so I really like that tour. And once I saw what I would be working with, I was sold on the opportunity immediately.
So one good way to get that across, IMTS, the big machine tool show in Chicago this year in September, the biggest trade show in the country or in the Americas, traditionally 130,000 attendees, and they have a student summit attached to it, and they get somewhere between 10 and 20,000, mainly high school, but some community college students, bussed in from up to 100, 150 miles away to attend and see the robots and the machine tools and all the exotic, nothing ever looks as good as in a trade show with a beautiful model sitting there to show it off. It looks pretty good. So anybody that's anywhere near Chicago, find that online and get your high school to send a busload, and we want more students to come in, because the younger you get them and get them started, the more likely they are to choose manufacturing.
Absolutely. No, I love that. So talking along those lines, Harry, do you have some career advice? It's one of our favorite segments, either for someone maybe looking to get into manufacturing or maybe someone looking to do some amount of reshoring. Do you have some career advice for people to get deeper into this?
Well, I think what I said before, that if I headed to start over again, probably apprenticeship followed by with associate's degree, bachelor's degree in engineering, MBA, something like that, or just stop and be a really great tool maker, which is wonderful. I mean, I run into companies where the tool makers with overtime are making $100,000 a year. Nothing wrong with $100,000 a year,
No.
and so that's my basic career advice. And it's not for everybody. You have to be reasonably numeric. You have to be able to work with people. You have to be good with your hands. It's adjusting and setting and doing things, and maintenance. There's a huge demand with all the automation. Instead of having a laborer do something, you now have a technician installing and repairing and programming the robot. But that's a fun job. Most kids, computers. This is I would think as good as it gets for a lot of people.
Perfect. No, I love that, Harry. I I don't know. I'm pumped up to get back out on the line on Friday morning. I can tell you that after this conversation. So I like to joke that this is our unsponsored Audible segment in which I ask you for a book recommendation or two, and then Vlad goes and spends his monthly Audible audiobook credit. But do you have an interesting book or two, either along the lines of business, manufacturing, or just in general that you enjoy?
Yeah, I didn't read a lot of business books. I probably should have, but I didn't. One that I do like related to it, this helped me,
No.
is called Give Your Speech, Change the World. And it talks about how to give a presentation, sort of like we're doing here, and how to relate to the audience, how to get their attention. But most important, how you don't make a speech, you give a speech. You give it to the audience so that they have something to walk away with, something that would help them do something different. If they don't go away and do anything different in their lives, for their company, for themselves, for the country, then it was a waste of time. You shouldn't have given the speech. You got to give the speech. And then for fun, I read sci-fi and fantasy, and one of my favorite series is the Dominic Flandry series by Frederick Pohl, and this is 20,000 years in the future, galactic empire kind of thing. And this guy is a James Bond of that era, so to speak. And so really, I think a wonderful series of books. And I'd encourage if you think science fiction is good for you, this is one of the ones to read.
You've sold me on the series, Harry. I'm getting off of this live show and I'm going to go see if I can't go rent it from the library immediately. But no, that is amazing. So on the sci-fi note, it is May the 4th. We'll wish everyone a happy Star Wars Day. I did make the joke in Tim Warburn's live stream earlier today. Happy Star Trek Day, everyone. So I can now both get all the love and all the hate that we possibly can from the sci-fi fans in one foul swoop. But no, that's amazing, Harry. Thank you. And then last question that I have for you is who should reach out to you? Who do you want to help? Who do you need help from?
Well, companies that have or might reshore. If you have done it, we'd love to hear about it. That's how we track the 400,000 jobs kind of thing. Yep. That have or might, we can help them. Again, gets up to 500,000. Government agencies that can encourage the trend. President Biden, they've done some good things. They're sort of applying tourniquets, like do the chips foundry, but they're not solving the underlying problem of making the U.S. price competitive. Until we become price competitive, companies won't bring their work back. So I'm afraid, for example, with the chip foundries, that they're going to invest tens of billions of dollars, and every other country is going to do it. There's going to be a surplus of chips. The price is going to come down, and we're going to be dependent on China to buy our chips to make the electronic assemblies of the chips back to us, and that doesn't make any sense. So in addition to doing the chip foundries, you need to change the terms of trade, change the dollar, change things like that, so that we become the great place for the chips to be assembled into electronic products once again. And Bright, I know Bright, they make electronic assemblies of various kinds. So you mentioned they're the sponsor. They provide equipment that could be helpful in making the U.S. once again competitive in that kind of product.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. So I know that we should be able to help you with companies who are looking to reshore jobs or products. I know that we can help you with some government agencies. I would imagine that the president isn't listening to this show, but just as an aside, if President Biden or literally any other president of any country listens to this show now or in the future, please drop me a line. I would love to chat, and then we can also pass you along to Harry. We'll also add in like prime ministers, premiers, kings, queens of any country. Yeah, you guys absolutely fall on that list. Please feel free to comment and or reach out directly if you do listen to this show. But no, Harry, this was amazing. I think everyone should be pumped up for more reshoring. I know that we will have to go ahead and post the links to some of the items that you have coming out, and we will absolutely make sure that we follow the reshoring initiative more closely so that we can make sure that all of the amazing things that you guys are doing continues to make it to the manufacturing hub Networks group and family as we continue to grow. But no, we want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for listening and being here with us live. Thank you for listening on your podcast. If you are still with us, if you have not given us a thumbs up and rated us 5 stars on your Apple podcast and your, or not iTunes anymore, but Spotify and Audible and all of those other places, please go ahead and do it. It helps to go ahead and push the show further. And if you know someone who would like to listen to this or any other show, please feel free to pass it along. I think we picked up about 30 or 40% of our listeners because people go ahead and share the podcast and are like, this is great, which is always a positive. But no, we want to, again, thank you, Harry. Thank you, everyone. Until next week, we'll see you all soon.
Very
Bye-bye.
good.
Thank you, everyone.